Well, welcome to the Practical Church Podcast. My name is Dylan Dotson, and this show exists to help you plant and grow healthy churches. Today's episode, I'm going to share with you 5 metrics your church should be tracking. Other than number 1, I think there's a good chance that you might not be tracking any of them. And so we're going to talk about those I think are helpful. As always, today's episode is brought to you by Mission Support. Mission Support knows you want to be effective in ministry, but if you're like most pastors, you probably feel like you never have enough time, energy, or expertise to get everything done. And so Mission Support comes along pastors just like you to help provide support with bookkeeping, SEO, payroll, websites, or any of their other services. Check out missionsupport.com today. And don't forget that they are offering 15% off for their reoccurring services if you join Mission Support before the end of this year. In other words, before the end of 2024, that's 50% off the services that you sign up for forever. 50% off. So check out their website today, talk to a guide, missionsupport.com. Get in before the end of 2024, and whatever services you need help with, it'll be 15% off forever as long as you need them. And now let's get into today's episode. All right, today I want to talk with you about 5 metrics your church should be tracking. 5 metrics. Now, again, the first one will be kind of obvious. These other ones are really like having to do with engagement of your church. And these are things that you may or may not be tracking some of them, but I would recommend checking all of them because it really gives you a better picture of what's going on and how people are connected and all that sort of thing. So here we go. Here's the first one. The first one is kind of obvious, but then I'll kind of explain where some churches might miss it. This is tracking your Sunday attendance. Now, this is kind of obvious. I have talked to some pastors that don't track this as a form of I don't think they mean it this way, but the way I've heard it explained is it comes across as a form of superiority, we don't care about that stuff. But I will say if you can't track numbers and you forget that numbers represent people, you don't know what your people are doing. And you don't know how things are going. You don't know if people are growing or if people are more coming or going or that sort of thing, other than just what you think when you based off of looking around the room. So you should be tracking your Sunday attendance. Now, you should also, that being said, now this might be obvious for most, but I think maybe some, particularly some church planters or maybe smaller churches, maybe don't do this, so they feel like it doesn't really matter yet. But you should break down your attendance tracking. So it should not just be how many people came to church on Sunday, or it should not just be how many people were in the auditorium. You need to track everything. So for New City, it's the auditorium. So we how many people, and we, by the way, we do attendance when the sermon starts, by the way. So if you're tracking your attendance at different times every week, it can hard to get a full picture. If you're tracking attendance when the service begins, so people might not all be there, or when the service is about to end, maybe some people have left. So you need to make sure you're tracking everything. So when the sermon starts, our safety person comes in and counts who's in the auditorium. By the way, we count everybody. So sound booth, band, live stream, everybody. Again, you want to be consistent with how you count. You don't want to leave it up to what people think. And so we tell everyone, include the pastor, include the band, include everybody everywhere in the auditorium. They all get a count. So you count the auditorium. They then go around and count each kids room individually. Now, and so I would break your church attendance down into how many kids rooms you have, or students, or whatever. If you have one kids room, how many people in the kids room? If you have multiple kids rooms, how many kids in each room? For us at New City for elementary, right? Currently, we have nursery, toddlers, and pre-K, and then elementary. So that's 4 classrooms. And then it's reflected of that in the attendance. And then we also count the lobby, how many people are in the lobby in the middle of the service. Now this can be safety people. If you've got people that are serving or doing things in the middle of the service and in the auditorium, you need to count everything every week so that you can have an accurate picture of where things are at. I know some churches, I talked to one guy where he was just counting his auditorium, in other words, mostly just his adults. And I'm that's not kids count too. And also you can't plan and prepare for how things are going. It's one thing to see if attendance is going up, but seeing where's it going up, or how kids are doing year over year, or that sort of thing. How many kids are in each various classroom. And so I would, again, track your attendance in every specific area and then add it up. There's lots of ways to do it. I'm not saying our ways are the best. How we've done it at New City Church is we have a clipboard with a piece of paper and the safety person, and we have the whole thing broken down. So it has I can't remember off the top of my head, but something to the effect of there's a line for auditorium, for lobby, for each elementary classroom, and then total kids, and then total. And they mark it down, and then that Sunday afternoon, we put it into our Google Sheet stuff. And so it gets tracked right away. I would recommend, however you do it, to like get it in your system, like a digital system, typically that Sunday, because it can be very easy to forget or to lose a piece of paper or whatever. And then you've lost like the information on that Sunday. So we do safety person for us does it right where the sermon starts. So kind of, maybe a third of the way through the service, that sort of thing. So everybody who's there is there, and they track each room, and then one of our staff puts it in that Sunday afternoon. But you want to track every area, break it down to how many classrooms or whatever that you have, and track everybody. Everybody gets counted. I would say this too, if you're multiple services, everybody gets counted. So if some people are there for 2 services, that means they get counted twice. Again, you need to be clear on this just so that you can have like accurate information. Because if some people are like, well, they were there at first service this week, so I'm not gonna count them, and it's not very clear, like whoever's doing your counting, like the expectations, then you can get numbers that are not very helpful. So you wanna track, again, Sunday attendance. This one might be obvious, but make sure you're tracking like every single area so that you know where things are at. You can track trends year over year, that sort of thing. You can kind of see like when our bigger Sundays are, so you can plan events and stuff around that and make decisions. But make sure you're tracking your Sunday attendance. Now that might be obvious. Here's a second one that might not be as obvious, and that is tracking your small group attendance. Now this can be small group, community groups, life group, missional communities, whatever kind of group thing your church does. If it does some sort of group thing, you need to be tracking it for a couple of reasons. One, like you just need to know how many people are in your groups. It's really easy to like be way off on this number if you don't know. It's kind of like having a financial budget. Many people don't have a financial budget, and they kind of think they have an idea of how much money they spend, and then they really don't. And I have a lot of first-hand experience with this, do a lot of premarital counseling, and so we talk the budget thing. I don't like force it on people, but I do talk through it. I kind of share like how Christina and I, my wife and I, do our family budget. I share within the sheet, whatever. And it's, 10 out of 10 times when somebody starts tracking their finances, they are always spending more than they thought in areas they didn't realize, typically eating out. So this is one of those areas, it's like you can kind of think you have an idea of how many people are signed up for a group, but if they like never go to a group, that doesn't really count. So we used to use a Google Sheet where we had a Google Sheet created for each group, and then every Thursday, our groups director would send out the leader guide for that next week, and then would say, hey, make sure you do your updated attendance, which, we have to follow up with a lot. Sometimes we didn't do it as well as others. Now this year we switched to Planning Center Planning Center groups. And so they get an email the day of their group, and all they have to do is like click the link, and it takes them right to their group, and they just got to check everyone who is there. And so we track attendance. This is helpful to know, like, if someone has like, let's say 14 people in their group, but what's their average attendance, or 10 people or whatever. Like, it's helpful to know how many people actually show up. It's helpful to know like how often people actually show up. If you have someone who shows up like twice a year, they're not really in a group. And that's also helpful to know. It's like, hey, this group isn't actually full if like people aren't showing up. So for example, at New City, we cap our groups, and then we start new groups so we don't like multiply, which is a fancy way of saying split. And I'm not against it, but if you've heard me share the episodes on groups, how we do New City, I won't do it all here, but we cap our groups. But this helps us know like how many people are actually showing up to this group, and do they have room? And it also allows us to do like three times a year, our community groups meet on 3 sessions. And so that lets us know like how many people came this last session. Do we need to move them in a group? Do we need to ask them if they're still invested or not invested? If they still like this group, if they're still engaged with this group. It's hard to like, you can say like, hey, there's like 10 people part of this group. But if they have like 6 people, 5 people showing up every week, then like it's probably not in a good spot, and you need to get more people in there pretty soon. So you should track group attendance. Now I will say, you do have to follow up on this. It is unhelpful if only some groups track attendance and some do not. And so however you do groups, whoever's in charge of them, don't feel bad every week saying, hey, can you do your attendance? Again, what I would recommend is if you do, like for us, we do a sermon. Our community groups are based off the sermon, and everybody does the same thing. So like we send out the leader guide every week, and we also can send a reminder. But Brian will also follow up individually with group leaders if they're getting behind on their attendance. Because here's the thing, like if a group leader does not track their attendance that week, they're not going to remember it 2 or 3 weeks from now. So you've got to stay on it. After a while, people will get it, and you'll create a culture of like, oh yeah, like this is part of leading a group to get attendance. But you got to get on probably like the first 6 months of trying to track group attendance. You've really got to stay on top of it, and then you've always got to be reminding people, because it is not helpful if you don't have accurate information. Again, numbers are always represented by people, and especially when it comes to group attendance, you don't just get numbers, you get their names. So you can see where people are, you can proactively reach out to people if something's going well, they don't show up. maybe they don't like the group, you can ask them like, hey, you want to try something out? Try something else out. Or like, to be honest, like, is this not a good season? Again, for us, like what we found is like, it's not helpful to have people in groups that don't show up very often, because then it's like taking spots away from people who actually like are gonna show up. So all that to say, I would highly recommend that you track your small group attendance. And so you can figure out how many people are showing up to groups. You can see like how many groups you need, what's going on there. It's an easy miss, I think, for a lot of churches, and it's not as hard as you think. Again, I do recommend if you use Planning Center groups, we found it to be a lot easier than a Google Sheet. But however you do it, you want to track group attendance. It's not as hard as you might think, and it can really show you some really valuable information. So small group attendance, second thing worth tracking. Number 3, and sorry, I'm getting over a cold. Number 3, unique giving units. Unique giving units. So in other words, how many people are giving to your church every single month? Now, I think probably a lot of churches do track this, but if not, or if you're newer, you may not realize you need to do this. It's not just, I mean, you obviously need to track your giving, like how much money you're taking in every single month. But it's also really helpful to know like how many giving units or people are giving a month. Now, we call them giving units just because like a family of 5 or whatever is only gonna be one giving unit. And so like we go by giving units, and it's hard to know like how many, I mean, what you can do is you can take your attendance and maybe divide by giving units to see like how many people, you know, is representing. But basically what I'm trying to say, you don't really have to do that. You can ignore what I just said. What I'm trying to say here is giving units, like how many people are giving each month. This is really one of the things that we track every month. And so we've got like 7 years of data on this. And so it's really like insightful to see, okay, this month we typically have this many giving units like year over year. And obviously you have to adjust a little bit for attendance and that sort of thing. But like it helps us know like if we have like two months of like really low average like the giving units goes down, like something's going on there. Month to month it can be a little hit or miss, you know, because most people give every month, some people give maybe every other month. But like it's just really helpful to have like years of data of like, okay, here are the months that we have more giving units, here are the months that we have less. If we have like a couple of really good months and like fewer giving units, it lets us know, okay, hey, like there are probably some bigger gifts here. It gives you more like accurate information. Now, I will say this too, and maybe this also goes back to like the Sunday attendance and tracking like every individual room. If you're a smaller church, you feel like it might not matter very much. Trust me, like as things develop, you're going to be appreciative that you have the most helpful information as possible. So you might be thinking, well, we've only got like 2 kids classrooms. Let's just count total kids. I'm just telling you, you'll like to know, especially as you're making decisions in the future, like how many kids classrooms, that sort of thing. It's helpful to know historically, like at what times the attendance looks like what. It's also helpful to know historically, not just like giving per month, but also giving units. Because especially if you're a smaller church, your month-to-month giving can sway a little bit based on people's, you know, income level. Maybe someone gets a bonus, maybe someone gives an extra large gift. And so that can help you compare a little bit. Okay, like we had a large month, but is it because like a lot of people gave, or we just had like a couple people give a lot? And so, and of course you can look in the data, like you can go back and see, do we have a good large giver this particular month? But like it's harder to do that 3 years ago. It's like, okay, in June in June of 2021, our giving was really high. What caused that? It's helpful to have like, we can also look at our giving units. Like how many giving units do we have? And so was it just a couple large gifts, or did a lot of people give? It's also a helpful track to trend overall, like for attendance, for Sunday attendance, like you're seeing like, hey, are we growing? Like are we static? You know, what's the attendance going? It's helpful to see like, is the number of giving units we have growing with attendance? Is it the same trajectory? Is it different? Or if attendance has been about the same, but like the last couple months we've lost, I don't know, 5, 10, maybe 30, depending on the size of your church, giving units. Like those are just things to help you explore what's going on. And so I'd recommend, obviously not just track your finances, that's obvious. The only obvious one I'm doing on this episode is the attendance. So obviously that. But one maybe you're not thinking about as much is actually giving units. Because again, the longer you've been doing this, the more helpful that information will be. So make sure you're drawing out giving units. And like again, for us, we track all, we call it our data tracking sheet. We have a Google Sheet with tabs with various things. You want this stuff to be like easily and quickly accessible. So yes, you can always go into Planning Center, your giving software, whatever, and say how many givers do we have this month. But it's easier, you know, over time if you can just like look at a Google Sheet and just say like, June 2021, June 2022, or July 2021, August 2021, or whatever. Like that's a lot easier. So you want to take this information every month, and you want to be able to, you want it to be very scannable, and not where you have to like go into the app every time I pull it all up. And so every single month, you want to track your giving units as well, and put it somewhere that you can easily access it. We found it to be very helpful. Number 4, Connect cards. I would recommend that you also track, we put hours on our attendance sheet. There's an attendance thing on there as well, where on Sunday we'll also note how many Connect cards we got. That's just helpful to know, like when or what times of the year do we get more Connect cards, or if we had a low Sunday and we had a lot of Connect cards, or high Sunday and a lot of lower Connect cards. Now again, Connect cards, like, it's just helpful to have this information over time, because week to week it can fluctuate a ton. You could have a lot of new people, maybe not, or maybe more people fill out a Connect card or not, maybe because the person who did your next steps, your announcements that week is better and maybe explained it well, maybe you had something going on, maybe you had a push. And so maybe the week to week is like, that can fluctuate, but it's really helpful for us, like on our data tracking sheet. I mean, we have it week to week on attendance. On our data tracking sheet, we have our month, like how many Connect cards did we get this month? And that's really helpful to know. Again, here's how many people we have on Sunday on average, here's how many Connect cards we get on average. Like, are we doing well on this or not? Like, for example, is 2 Connect cards per 100 people good or bad? Is it good or bad? Now you might answer that differently based on your context, but like, if you say 2 Connect cards per 100 people is good on average attendance, are you hitting that? Because if it is good, like whatever good will be defined for you, do you have any way of knowing that you're actually hitting that other than just like feeling, or how you felt week to week or whatever? And so I would recommend that on your attendance sheet, you track how many Connect cards you got that week. Put in your attendance sheet, however you track it digitally. And then for your data tracking, which is what we do, we have one of our tabs. Maybe I can explain our tabs really quick. I'm not gonna remember all of them. We do giving, per month. We have assets, so how much money is actually in the bank. We have giving units. We have website views. We have Connect cards. We have how many people are involved in small groups, and there's a couple others. But all of these that I'm talking about today are on that tab, and one of those is Connect cards. Like, how are we doing? Are we doing well? Are we not doing well? Are we doing better than we were last year, or are we not? And it can help you set goals towards that end. So again, I would recommend that you actually track, and again, Connect cards, whatever you call them, like however you get information from new people. As a side note, I have an episode somewhat recently, I can't remember the number, so you can scroll back on how to get more Connect cards. So if you're struggling, go back to that episode. I think it's pretty recent. And you can see how to get more of them. But again, you don't know if you're doing well if you're not tracking them. So you don't know how you're doing. You can't win if you don't know what the score is. So track those Connect cards. I think that might be insightful for you. And I think perhaps it might be encouraging in some ways. Like, actually, we're getting some of these, or maybe some areas of improvement. Make sure you track your Connect cards. That was number 4. And number 5, this one will take some explaining. I would track whether your members are doing what you're asking them to do. So members, partners, whatever you call them at our church, your church, at New City, we call them partners. So we have 4 things essentially that we ask our partners to do. 3 things. One, you have to be a follower of Jesus and be baptized, but like that's not something we track. It's like, have you been baptized or not, that sort of thing. It's not like a continual thing that we track. We ask you to serve in some capacity. We ask you to give financially, and we ask you to be a part of a group. Okay, those are the 3 things that we ask of our people. We also ask that you make Sunday attendance a priority, but like, we can kind of tell that, but not fully, because obviously we're not tracking like on Sunday morning, we're just tracking the number, not the people. Although for groups, we are tracking the people. So we do know this information. We do know this. So like we have a sheet, a Google sheet, where I forget what it calls, like partner involvement or something like that. And it has all of our partners, and it has an X over if they have engaged in these things this year. So one of the X's is for serving. Are they currently serving? Or have they given? And are they in a group? And then every year we take that in January when we redo our partnership, we reach out to all our partners and say, hey, are you in for another year? Like, we actually know if people are doing what we're asking them to do. You can't say your church has a value if the behavior doesn't match it up. And so if somebody says, hey, I'm all in, I'm committed to this church, and you've been clear about here's what it looks like to be a partner, member, or whatever at our church, you need to be tracking if your partners are actually doing what you're asking them to do. Not to be legalistic, not to beat them over the head. And there can be legitimate reasons why somebody is not involved in something. Like if somebody lost a job or is in a very medical crazy expenses, it's okay if they're not giving. Like, we're not gonna be like, why aren't you giving? If somebody's in a season of life, they're traveling for their work a ton and they gotta take a break from groups, like, it's okay. Like, we're not gonna beat you over the head about it. We just wanna know what's going on to make sure that you're doing okay. And so a big reason that we track, there's 2 big reasons why we track what our members are doing. One, is like, they said they're gonna do it. And so like, we wanna be consistent with what we ask. And 2, like, we wanna make sure people are good. And it's a really good tell to know like, hey, are you in or not? And then every year, I don't know if this happened every year, but maybe it has. I think more often than not, it's actually been really helpful for us to reach back out in January because everybody knows, like we're very clear this is what we're going to do. To have people who have kind of disengaged, maybe stop showing up to kind of tell us, yeah, like for whatever reason, like we've moved on to another church or we've just decided to stop coming. Because it's no longer awkward. Like, hey, let's not pretend here. Like if we're in, let's be in. If not, like that's okay, but let's be honest about what's going on. And so again, you should track what you're asking your members to do. Whatever you're asking members to do, it should be trackable and you should see if they're actually doing it. For us, I know like, for example, a member could give once a year and they would get an X. So like that's not ideal. I mean, you could do it every quarter if you want to, or whatever. But like the things you're asking them to do, for us, that's how it is. Like, have you served this year? Have you given this year? And have you been in a group this year? Now, granted, we tracked group attendance, so we know. And if somebody gave once in like February, by the end of the year when we do the partnership renewal, we would double check that as well. But we would know like, are they engaged or are they not? That's a really helpful way to do it. And I think a lot of churches missed out on this point, is to track what you're asking your members to do so they'll actually know if they're doing it. So again, those are 5 metrics your church should track. Number 1, Sunday attendance. Make sure you're breaking it up in all the different rooms and areas that you're tracking, and everybody gets counted. Everybody gets counted. Number 2, small group attendance. You can actually know who's actually in your groups. Number 3, unique giving units. How many givers do you have every single month? Number 4, connect cards. How many connect cards are you collecting every Sunday or every month? And then number 5, whatever you're asking your members to do, make sure you're tracking it to see if your people are actually doing what you're asking, or if you need to be clear or lead better to guide people in the direction you want your church to go. Today's ministry observation is, again, also a reminder, and I just want to say this. You need to remember to be clear about your ministry expectations and then own it. Be clear. And one of the most unhelpful things you can do is to be unclear. Clarity is kindness. And so listen, I'll give you an example. This year, when we went back to 2 services in this fall, we changed how we have done serving from when we did 2 services in the past. So we went back to 1 service this summer. We changed how we did serving. And so I wouldn't say pushback is the appropriate word, but people are used to how things were done one way. And so unless we want to shift the culture, we have to be very clear about what we're doing. And we have to own, here's why we're asking you to serve in this way. And by the way, it is okay if you don't want to do it. Like that's our big thing right now. Like it's okay, you don't have to do it. Here's what I found. What we would also say, like, I would rather have in this, for example, less people serving and everybody be excited about what we're doing than trying to continue to drag people on to the new way of how we were doing it. So whatever your expectations are for groups, for serving, for giving, for your members, whatever they are, just like be very clear and then own it and then give people outs. It's always better to have fewer people heavily invested because that will create the culture you want going forward. And then as new people, so for example, as new people join our serve teams, they don't know how we used to do serving. And so when we tell them here's how serving works at New City Church, everyone's like, okay, that's how I do it. The problem is, if they start serving this way, but then there's a couple of people, let's say 20, 30% of the people who are kind of not doing it the way we're doing it now, but doing it the way we used to do it, the new people are gonna be like, well, do we have to do it this way or not? And so whatever it is in your case, when it comes to your ministry leading expectations, be very clear, and then own it. Don't apologize for it. Give people outs, be gracious and kind. Again, I would say for New City, here's how we've done it, because we've made some changes of how we've done some things as a church and this year as a church, serving and otherwise. In Raleigh, North Carolina, there's a lot of great churches. And New City Church obviously is not the church for everybody. I would rather you go to a church that you feel excited about than feel like we got to drag you along here at New City Church. And I genuinely believe that. And so here's the direction New City's going. It's not the best way. It's not the only way. It's just how we operate as a church. There's a lot of other great churches, but we want people to be excited about what we're doing and our mission and our specific local expression at New City Church. And so again, my observation, my reminder is just be very clear about your ministry expectations. Own it, be kind and gracious, and remember, less is more. If everybody's aligned and excited, you will see a lot more momentum than trying to drag people on to continue to explain what you're trying to do. Well, in today's personal growth tip, I want to share with you how to feel less busy. Share with you how to feel less busy, and here's 4 ways that you can feel less busy, starting this week. Okay, here are 4 simple yet foundational habits that I have discovered and used over the years myself that help me save time and feel less busy. And by the way, the reason I feel less busy is because I am less busy, because busyness is a choice. So let me give you 4 ways to feel less busy. Number 1, I would encourage you to stick with inbox zero. Now, I would say if you go to DylanDotson.com, just a side note, my website, and you can type in inbox zero, and I've got like a written instruction blog about how to get to inbox zero. It's not as hard as you think, so check that out. I just want to say this, in my experience, most people spend way too much time on email, and then they also do so very inefficiently. I just want to remind you that email is invited interruption. You check your inbox, it's like you're inviting somebody to knock on your door and interrupt your flow of concentration and focus. If we are not intentional with how we use our email, it becomes one of the biggest time wasters in our life. I can't tell you, everybody does this, but I'm in ministry world, so I'll go to like conferences or whatever, pastor gatherings and things, and it's like people are incessantly checking the email app on their phone. And I'm like, bro, like, can we just hang out together for a few hours? Like, why do we gotta do this? So, sticking with inbox zero is my favorite, DylanDotson.com. I think it's literally /blog/0 or email. But if you just search it, you can find like my guide. It's really not hard. But for now, I would just say like, check your email less. Check your email less and you'll feel less busy. Number 2, removing email from your phone. So this is part of the way to do it. The less you check your email, the fewer emails you will write, and the fewer emails you will receive, therefore the less time you will spend on it. Often people check their email on their phones, by the way, many times purely out of boredom and habit. In my years of recommending removing email from their phone to people, 2 things have happened for people who have actually done it. So I do this all the time. The small percentage of people who actually do it, this is the same 2 things that happen all the time. Number 1, they're all nervous about missing things, and they really doubted it would make that much of a difference. I mean, to every person who's done it, who I've talked about this, they're all like, I'm not sure, and I might miss things. And then number 2, here's what always happens. This is about 100% of the time. They've all been very surprised at how much of a difference it made. We're glad they did it, and now they recommend it to others as well. So if you want to feel less busy, delete email off your phone. What I do, I don't have the app, I don't have any email app on my phone. If I need to check my email for something on my phone, I just go to the web browser and log in. Even that like small friction point keeps me from just like checking it as a habit. So take it off your phone. You don't need it on your phone. Number 3, turning off all notifications on my phone. This is what I recommend if you want to feel less busy. Like email, phone notifications are invited interruptions. Every ding, buzz, and vibration of your phone is an invited interruption to stop doing what you're doing and check your phone. And of course, they help drive your phone addiction. For most people with most apps, there's actually 0 reason to have a notification turned on. And so instead, check things when you want to check them. This includes, even for me, text messages. If you don't want to be glued to your phone, you will do. There's nothing that you can do that will be more helpful than turning off notifications on your phone, including text in particular. Again, there's no rule that text messages have to be responded to instantly, but there is this, however, you get to decide how you spend your time, so don't let your phone do it for you. Here's the thing, you're gonna check your text anyway, so like if you think email's extreme, let me try this. Well, I'm not saying take text off your phone, but take off all the notifications, the vibrations, like even the little red notification icon. Like the only reason I know I have text if I go in my text app and look at them. Now, I'm gonna do that throughout the day anyway. There's no reason I need to be buzzed or vibrated every single time someone texts me. Take it off your phone, you'll check your phone less, you'll feel less busy. And then number four, I do my bedtime routine right after I eat dinner. My bedtime routine after I eat dinner. So this is what it looks like for me. I floss, I change my clothes, I pick out my clothes for the next day, and I make whatever lunch I'm gonna have for the next day. Here's why I do this. We all know what it's like when it's time for bed, but then like the thought of like doing your bedtime routine, it's like, I don't wanna do that. So you like sit there, scroll on your phone, read a book, whatever. You kind of push off the inevitable, and then you stay up even later instead of like going right to bed. So doing these things right after dinner helps reduce the friction it takes to get to bed on time. So the only thing I do when I go to bed is brush my teeth. Because I floss, I take my contacts out. Again, if I don't have something going on in the evening, I've changed my clothes, I picked my clothes up for the next day, I made my lunch, all the things that like I would typically do right before bedtime, I do it like right after dinner. I've been doing this for years, so that when it's time for bed, like there's no friction, brush my teeth, go to bed, it makes it a lot faster, feel less busy. So again, those are 4 things you can do to feel less busy. Today's question comes from the Practical Church Facebook group. If you're on Facebook, make sure you join the group, ask questions, talk with other ministry leaders. It comes from Steve. Steve writes this: does your church use a particular app to help team leads and team members communicate? If so, what works best? Our church currently uses Planning Center. They currently use Planning Center. Thanks. Now, I want to do 2 things with this. One, I want to say this, and this wasn't necessarily his question, but I just want to remind you, it's like just a personal, not pet peeve, but just a personal opinion. I don't think churches should have apps. unless you're like a very large church or for a very specific reason, most churches should not have a church app. Now, he's not asking for a church app, but I think some people might assume like, well, have a church app. Here's why. Most people only open like a very small percentage of apps on their phone. And the likelihood that they're going to download your church app and actually engage with it is very, very low. My recommendation is point everybody to your website. Point everybody to your website. That's where everything is. That way there's less things that people have to go to. That's not what he was saying. I'm just saying I'm not a big fan of church apps. Wouldn't recommend them. Unless you're like a large church or for a very specific reason. Most of us, however, that's not the case. Don't get them. Now, for team members to communicate, my thing with this is like, for church software, I recommend Planning Center because it's the most user-friendly. And you want the thing that's easiest for people to actually use, so they'll actually use it. Planning Center does have an option where people can the church can communicate. I think it's called, I forget what it's called. Here's my thing. I wouldn't recommend having a place where like all the church can talk digitally, because literally as I'm recording this 2 weeks ago, I was with a church pastor friend of mine, and they're going through like a really big church issue right now. Basically, 2 other elders stepped down. It's been this whole thing. And then the elders went to release their reason for leaving the church on the church message board. They use Planning Center for this, I'm not sure how, without telling the current elders, the current pastor, or anything. They said they left on good terms. There's just a difference in ministry philosophy. And then they decided to like do this like condemnation of the church on this church messaging board. Now, beside the fact of like they promised one thing, did the other, like that's not great. Like they were actually going to have a church-wide meeting that Sunday afternoon, but this happened on a Wednesday. And so like now for 5 days, this thing got posted online. Like it wasn't helpful. I don't really know like what you want for communication purposes. I mean, if people can text, email, phone, I've just like not, unless you're like a really small, maybe house church, really small church plant, I don't really know that you need a place where people can like all communicate together. I mean, Facebook groups, I mean, those are a potential place. Like you can do a church Facebook group for maybe needs and requests and that sort of thing. You just have to monitor it, make sure they're okay. For team leads and team members, however, what we do is we use Planning Center, and then the people who schedule that sort of thing, you can actually send out emails through Planning Center, and so that's what we do. I don't know if that's super helpful, but how a particular app to help your team leads and team members communicate. And then also we just do email, like we'll email people individually as well for that sort of thing, or text or phone call. But we use Planning Center. And then you can like email your teams through Planning Center. And that's what we do if we need to email them. We do email our serve teams every week to like, here's a reminder, that sort of thing. The size of your church matters. So like right now, for like if you serve on First Impressions, you can send an email through the First Impressions thing or through Planning Center, but our First Impressions director just takes all the emails that people that are serving and does like an actual email from her actual email account, not through Planning Center. I think if you got a lot bigger, you could do that, but it feels a little bit more personal. So that's what we use. We use Planning Center, and then we just do personal emails as well to communicate things. And that's how we do it. So I hope that was helpful. Well, again, as always, thanks for joining me today on the Practical Church Podcast. If you're listening to this wherever you get your podcasts, we're also on YouTube, so you can check out if you want to watch the video version there. And don't forget to check out Mission Support and get connected with them for 15% off their reoccurring services, whether it's bookkeeping, SEO, payroll, websites. Just check out their services, see what they provide, see how they can help you from being frustrated and maybe doing things that drain you, to help you focus on things that you actually love and be excited about ministry again. So make sure you check them out before the year is out, missionsupport.com. And if you want more from the show, missionsupport.com/practical. You can submit questions for a future episode and all that sort of things. You can subscribe to our newsletter where every other week we also send practical tips and updates to help you plant and grow healthy churches. And until next time, stay safe, Merry Christmas, and I'll be with you on the next episode of the Practical Church Podcast.